Mission 1, start!
In episode 257 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at SNK's Metal Slug 3, released to the PlayStation 4 by Code Mystics with a physical edition published by Limited Run Games. When it comes to Metal Slug, the third installment frequently tops many people's lists as the best in the series, including our own. But another in the Metal Slug series also frequently takes the top spot, depending who you ask.
Metal Slug X is an enhanced redux of SNK's 1998 Metal Slug 2, released to the Neo Geo MVS by SNK in 1999. It would also be released to the Neo Geo AES in 1999 and the original PlayStation in 2001. The North American and PAL releases were handled by AgeTech. Several other releases of the MVS version would also see released in various anthologies, standalone releases, and the Neo Geo Arcade archives over the years. But for this review, we'll be playing the Japanese PlayStation version. Can it beat Metal Slug 3? Let's take a closer look.
Starting out, players have their choice between 4 fighters. Metal Slug 2 introduced Fio and Eri to the Metal Slug roster, so it's no surprise that they are also in Metal Slug X as well. Like all of the early Metal Slug games, all of the characters behave exactly the same as one another from a control standpoint, with only cosmetic differences between all 4.
As a run and gunner, players move their selected character to the left or right by using the PlayStation's D-pad. Metal Slug X also has DualShock support. By default, players fire their weapons using the square button, while jumping is handled with the cross button and grenades the circle button.
Like the Neo Geo versions of the game, there is no rapid fire here. Players will need to jam on that fire button if they want to chuck a hail of pistol fire at their enemies. Despite the weakness of the standard pistol, a player with a quick thumb can often still make short work of most enemies they'll encounter, even tanks. Players can also aim their fire up or down by holding the appropriate directional button, though firing down can only be achieved while jumping. Otherwise, the player will crouch to avoid mid-level shots. These controls also apply to the slugs as well, which we'll get into shortly.
Of course, a well-placed grenade or two will help greatly in taking out fortified positions, mechanized units, and armored vehicles, even with just the basic gun. But liberating POWs will often yield one of a number of special weapons, from the fan-favorite heavy machine guns, shotguns, or rocket launchers, to more exotic ones like the super grenade or drop shot, or large weapon variants. Many of these weapons were added for the first time in Metal Slug X, earning them a spot in the future games. As always, these weapons have limited ammo, but some POWs can drop a top-up, indicated by a crate full of bullets.
We tend to use grenades liberally throughout any Metal Slug game, but POWs will drop bomb crates to increase the number of grenades available to the player. Starting with just 10 on a fresh life or stage start, each additional bomb crate will add another 10 grenades to the stock. These can also be swapped out for fire bombs, which can cover a wider area than just the standard pineapple. Another thrown weapon, Stone, is also added to Metal Slug X, resulting in even more variety.
Of course, players will come across a number of the series' namesake. The Slugs are back, but with additional unit types accompanying the Special Vehicle 001. The Slug Flyer, a Harrier-style jet with powerful forward-firing missiles. The Slugnoid, a sideways shuffling double machine gun walker with a rather suggestive downward-firing cannon. And the Camel Slug, which is exactly what you'd expect it to be.
These vehicles are able to take a few hits before being destroyed, but if players get overwhelmed, enemies can make quick work of them. However, these vehicles can also be repaired with jerry cans, which are sometimes found by saving POWs or Rumi Aikawa, as well as destroying certain enemy units. The slugs can also be launched as a weapon, but will be completely destroyed as a result. Unfortunately, we found that this was very easy to do when attempting to jump and fire at the same time, especially with the Slugnoid. Of course, if we're talking slugs, there are also situations where, this is totally possible in 2-player games. Giddy up.
Metal Slug plays over the course of 6 stages, most of which have several phases for players to make their way through. Players can even start the game on any stage they've made it to, allowing for easy practice in more troublesome stages. There's enough craziness here to keep things pretty interesting, and the game doesn't overstay its welcome like Metal Slug 3 kind of does. The shorter length and linear non-branching stages make it a much more manageable Metal Slug than 3, and the multiple difficulty settings allow for new players to make some decent progress even on just 1 credit.
Metal Slug X also features a couple of status effects in conjunction with certain stages and situations. Though obviously fewer in number than in Metal Slug 3, we appreciate that there isn't a billion different ways to be slowed down or impeded. Players can be turned into mummies if caught in the smoke of a mummified enemy or purple liquid. This will slow the player's movement, restricts the player to pistols only, and can be reversed with a special potion.
Additionally, big status occurs when players eat a whole whack of food at a time. This makes the player much larger, slower, and easier to hit, but also increases their shot and grenade power as a result. Big can be reversed with diet food or over time. It can be advantageous so long as the players are skilled enough to properly use it. Metal Slug X makes this happen much sooner than in Metal Slug 2, where it can only happen starting in Stage 4.
A number of changes were made for X from Metal Slug 2. Most notably, a new engine similar to what would be put into Metal Slug 3 fixes a lot of the slowdown issues that the second game exhibited. As such, generally speaking, Metal Slug X runs well on the PlayStation, though there is still some slowdown here and there, especially when playing co-op. That said, as always, Metal Slug X is a terrific two-player game, though a bit of coordination will definitely be needed to make sure players don't accidentally hog all of the weapons and extra ammo. As far as run-and-gunners go, this is definitely one of the better ones on the platform.
Other changes were made as well. Metal Slug X has more enemies, more POWs, and more power-ups than Metal Slug 2. Vehicle, POW, and enemy placement is also different, keeping things fresh for Metal Slug 2 veterans. Bosses have also been shuffled around too. New slug variants and enhancements like armor-piercing rounds can be picked up at certain points in the game as well. More than a simple director's cut, the difference between 2 and X are significant all the way down to the core of the game.
There are even some additional modes for players to get even more out of Metal Slug X. Combat School challenges players to a race against the clock or to get as far as they can on just one life. The better the player does, the higher the rank they will achieve through earned points. Players can also open up another mission, which lays out a number of challenges for players to overcome. These can be pretty hard to complete, so veterans have a lot to look forward to. Metal Slug X, like its predecessors and successors, has a lot of scoring opportunities to take advantage of throughout the game. Obviously, enemy destruction adds to the score as one might expect, but there's much more to take into consideration here versus a lot of other run-and-gun type games.
As was the case when we examined Metal Slug 3, rescuing prisoners will often reward the player bonus items. These bonus items can vary greatly from single-digit point values into the tens of thousands, depending on what it is. Bonus items can also be revealed in a number of other places too. Certain structures and containers can be destroyed, hidden points can be hit, and some can be dropped by Rumi if her bag is shot before she's tagged.
Another way for players to nab a ton of points is to take out chains of certain enemies, which we also saw implemented into Metal Slug 3. Usually, if a chain of enemy units are led by a red version of the same foe, taking out the red enemy will cause all of the others in the train to blow up as well, resulting in huge bonuses of up to 50,000 points. However, if a regular enemy from the group is destroyed before the red one, the chain won't be activated, and players will need to take out all of the units one at a time, with no bonus.
Once again, the key to scoring really big in any Metal Slug game is being able to make it through the stage in question unharmed. Any hostages, special characters, special slugs, and finishing the stage with an intact slug will all contribute to a giant stage end score that can dramatically boost the player's points in general. If a player dies, any hostage's save will be lost, and players will need to free more by the end of the stage to nab at least a few extra points.
Getting all of these bonuses definitely takes practice and an intimate knowledge of every nook and cranny of every stage in order to maximize how much players are getting. Basically, while the scoring can be easy, getting the largest scores can also be very hard, especially when traversing the most densely packed part of every stage to get as many hostages and bonuses as possible. And all while taking on a brutally aggressive enemy force.
Uncharacteristically, the PSX version of Metal Slug X maintains scores if continues are used, instead emphasizing how many continues are used at the game's end. Of course, local leaderboards can extend the replay of this release too, especially when taking the Another missions into account, each of which has its own small leaderboard. All of these scores can be saved to a PlayStation memory card. It's just another way Metal Slug X will have us coming back for more.
In general, Metal Slug X received a pretty big overhaul to its visuals and sound, setting it even further apart from Metal Slug 2 as a result. Numerous changes were made to X in addition to the new features and engine under the hood.
Right away, players will notice that the stages in X take place at different times of day than in Metal Slug 2. A new announcer also replaces the one from Metal Slug 1 and 2. This new announcer is the one that would become the series mainstay to this day, belting out the now iconic heavy machine gun and rocket launcher clips we all know and love.
Rocket launcher.
We really like the presentation of Metal Slug on the whole. The smooth animation, the super detailed pixel art, the over-the-top announcers, and great music throughout makes it a series that only gets better with age. And that makes the PlayStation version of Metal Slug X a very big disappointment audio-visually.
At a glance, Metal Slug X looks the part on PSX, but look a little closer and it's very evident that a lot of corners were cut in this specific release. There are way fewer frames of animation on literally everything here, which is in stark contrast to that of the Neo Geo release. We have no idea how Metal Slug X couldn't have been fully presented on the PlayStation, given its storage capacity and performance advantages, but here it is.
It goes further. Not only has the animation been vastly reduced, a ton of detail has also been lost in the explosion and shot effects for pretty much everything. The exquisite Neo Geo pixel art for these representations of destruction give way to sloppy, murky, choppy, pixelated garbage. All in all, while the stages, characters, enemies, vehicles, and bosses are more or less all here and still exhibit some truly excellent design, this is still probably the ugliest version of Metal Slug X that has yet seen release.
The sound has also taken a pretty nasty hit. Most notably, the music is muffled and low quality compared to the original release. The Combat School VO is especially muffled, which is a bit of a shame. Paired with the reduced graphical quality, Metal Slug X loses a lot of the charm that the Neo Geo releases had, which is a shame because despite these setbacks, the gameplay on the PSX still holds its own. The skill players develop transfers 100% when playing on, say, the ACA Neo Geo Switch version.
At least the interface is solid. The stage select screen and combat school sections both have excellent pixel art, and the loading screen for each stage features neat little pieces relevant to the upcoming area. Definitely a step up from juggling monkeys. It should also be noted that the scene transitions are also pretty smooth in this version with a more natural fade to the play area. It's a nice touch. So how does Metal Slug X on PSX stack up? Let's take a look. With as many issues as Metal Slug X on PlayStation has, at least control isn't one of them.
This game plays well enough that skill learned here transfers seamlessly to other versions of the game.
Metal Slug X isn't the easiest game around, but it's definitely more manageable than, say, Metal Slug 3.
This, along with the first in the series, is a game that makes for a great entry point into Metal Slug in general.
With 6 stages of moderate length, Metal Slug X feels much shorter than others in the series, especially up against Metal Slug 3.
But it also doesn't overstay its welcome. Another mission and combat school increases replayability.
The great design of the Metal Slug series is still here, but the animation is scaled way back.
The super pixelated explosions and shot effects only make things even worse for the game from a visual standpoint.
Once again, the iconic announcer and stage BGM in Metal Slug X are great standouts.
But the overall muffled quality makes the sound less great than almost every other Metal Slug we've played.
In 2001, it was great to get a revamped, remixed version of Metal Slug 2 without having to get a Neo Geo, but the PlayStation version isn't an ideal way to get the best experience Metal Slug X has to offer.
The extra modes are fine and all, but way better, more accessible versions are available on modern platforms. We'll take those over a bunch of novelty challenges any day.
Metal Slug X is moderately priced depending on region with a decent value, even with the kind of concessions made to get this game to work on PlayStation, which is a bit of a mystery.
Compared to copies of Metal Slug 2 on Neo Geo CD and X on AES and MVS, it's a much cheaper buy with a good value. But newer digital releases on PS4 and Switch offer a vastly superior, more pure experience.
This is definitely Metal Slug, and in some ways it's better than Metal Slug 3, but the severely scaled back nature of the visuals and sound are really very jarring on the PlayStation. Now, I still had a lot of fun with it, but it's not one that I'll keep playing outside of streaming on the PSX. Too much of its identity was lost in this version, which is a huge shame. Even ignoring the shortcomings for the PlayStation version in specific and playing other versions, after all is said and done, we have to say that Metal Slug X doesn't quite hold up to the excellence of Metal Slug 3. When it's all said and done, Metal Slug X on the PSX still manages a 3.75 out of 5. Of course, I'd give other versions a solid 4 at least. With that in mind, if a PSX physical for Metal Slug X is still something you need, you can very easily find it at auction. This is it. It's time to finish things up how we started this series with perhaps the most requested heavy hitter in Bullet Heaven history. Hyperduel rounds out Series 11 in episode 280.
It's a legend, but it was also expensive. Will Hyperduel hold up to its hyped-up reputation, or will it succumb to our critical eye like Guardian Force? Find out in the thrilling conclusion to Bullet Heaven Series 11.